Hi, thanks for watching. Where would be the best place to bury lies? Well, in a library, of course, and nobody was more instrumental than Andrew Carnegie when it came to creating libraries, which was a way to make sure we all got with the programme and followed the mainstream narrative. There was also an ulterior motive. Whilst creating these libraries, it also gave a construction date to thousands of old world buildings all across the world, which already existed. So, in essence, the buildings became part of the lies. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. Joseph Goebbels, who was Adolf Hitler's propaganda minister. So, let's check out some lies and some libraries. This is the Mitchell Library, and it's quite an impressive building, and I'll have a closer look at it later on. This is the front door, this is the back door, and like I say, we'll have a closer look later. But first, we'll go to this site and we'll have a look at Andrew Carnegie and his story. I won't be reading everything, just some bullet points. Andrew Carnegie's surprising legacy. Before his death in 1919, steel magnate and philanthropist Andrew Carnegie helped fund the creation of some 2,800 libraries across the world. Right, so it goes on to tell you he was born poor in Scotland, and then he went over to Pennsylvania, and before you knew where you were, he was extremely wealthy. And with the aid of the knowledge he gleaned from books, Carnegie later reached the pinnacle of success in the American business world. The former Bob and Boy rose to become a personal secretary, railroad superintendent, financial investor, and bridge company owner. By the 1870s, he had founded his first steel plant, which eventually grew into the mighty Carnegie Steel Company. In 1901, at the age of 65, Carnegie sold the business to none other than industrialist J.P. Morgan for a cool $480 million, the equivalent of over $13 billion today. Aye, right. And you can pause that and read if you like. I'm interested in what it says here. And it says, after selling his business, he kicked the program into overdrive. From a few early locations in Pennsylvania, he eventually underwrote the construction of 2,811 libraries. Right. Okay. So it tells you here that there were Carnegie libraries in New York, Chicago, and also more remote places such as Talladega, Alabama, and Thermopolis, Wyoming. There was even a lone branch in Hawaii. Several hundred other Carnegie libraries were erected in Canada, England, Scotland, and Ireland. There were also scattered libraries in such far-flung places as the Caribbean, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and even the Pacific island of Fiji. Right, so here they tell you this is the floor plan of a typical Carnegie library, right? Then it goes on to tell you, well, the libraries never had a set architectural style, yet they're telling you this is a typical floor plan. Right, so here's an example. This is the Carnegie Library in St. Joseph, Missouri, and it is 100% in mud. I would bet my life the rest of the building is another 20 feet at least below the street level. So, all told, Andrew Carnegie eventually gave away roughly 90% of his personal fortune during his lifetime, some $60 million, the modern equivalent of around $1.5 billion, went solely to the construction of libraries. By the time he died in 1919, the former Prince of Steel and Captain of Industry had earned himself a new nickname, the patron saint of libraries. The next place we'll look at for lies is, well, here, Wikipedia. The biggest library on earth. There's probably more lies connected to Wikipedia than anywhere else. And like I say, you can pause this and read. I'm interested in what it says down here. The Carnegie Formula. And it says quite clearly, nearly all of Carnegie libraries were built according to the Carnegie Formula, right? Which required financial commitments for maintenance and operation from the town that received the donation. Carnegie required public support rather than making endowments because, as he wrote, an endowment institution is liable to become the prey of a clique. He would know a lot about that. The public ceased to take interest in it, or rather, never acquires interest in it. The rule has been violated, which requires the recipients to help themselves. Everything has been done for the community instead of being only helped to help itself. And here's a strange bit. Carnegie required the elected officials, the local government, to demonstrate the need for a public library, provide the building site, pay staff and maintain the library, draw from public funds to run the library, not use only private donations, and annually provide 10% of the cost of the library construction to support the operation and provide free service to all. So, for reading that, he doesn't actually do much. He lets other people do it for him, and they provide the building site. That's interesting. And as I scroll down this page, you can see the list of Carnegie libraries in the United States. And there's no shortage. They are everywhere. Right. So, that's just in the States. And we'll have a look at some of them. Right. So, here we have a couple of images of the library in Washington DC, and as you can see, it's now under new ownership. Surprise, surprise. And you can see there's definitely floors below the street and archetypical stairs going up to the new front door, because the original front door is 20 feet below. And there's quite blatantly the top of windows at street level. And I think this is the Library of Congress in Washington, or it used to be. It is also owned by this same fruit company. Right, and inside it is like a typical library. Lots of space. And we can now look at some of the libraries in California. And the one thing they all have in common is they have a door up from the street, and you can see there is a floor below the street. So this is just some of them, and I'm guessing this is there for a reason, to hide the window lintels of the floor that's below the street. And again, you'll see they all have one thing in common. They all look like old world buildings, and this one's a cop shop. Right, and they are no different than any other building in mud. So cleverly, they have gave them all a date of construction. And apparently, they were all built in the space of 30 years. All across the world. This is just California. I mean, they are everywhere. So you can see a running theme here, right? Everything up above the street. Even this. There's a basement. Well, that's what we'll call the basement. There's also another one below that. Because most of these buildings, like I said earlier, are at least 20 feet below the street. Right, so there's no shortage in California when it comes to Carnegie libraries and mud buildings, which they certainly are. Right, so that's enough in California. You get my point now? Right. Okay. That's enough of that. And these are some of the libraries in New Zealand. Now, the thing about these libraries, they were all there before the white settlers got there. They're all in place, just waiting for a date of construction. And the one thing you can look for, and you won't find, for any of these buildings that I've shown you, you'll never find the blueprints. The reason being, we never built them. And the same thing can be said about the Mitchell Library. And this actually is where the archives are for this city. And the next video I'll post, I'll be showing you what happened when I put in a Freedom of Information request for a A-listed building in the city. But first, let's have a brief look at what they say about this building. And here's a guy it's named after, apparently, Stephen Mitchell, manufacturer and another philanthropist. Is a Scottish tobacco manufacturer and philanthropist. He was the founder of the Mitchell Library, and he was known for philanthropy. Well, I'm supposed he'd rather have that as a slave trader, because this city has plenty of them. And again, here we see the library is based in the Charing Cross district, was initially established in Ingram Street in 1877 following a bequest from Stephen Mitchell. Right, and this is the building that they say was the library. Now I can assure you this was no library, because this is in a part of the city known as Merchant City. So there's no place for a library in Merchant City. And they also say part of the original collection came from the purchase in 1874 by Glasgow Corporation of 1800 early books gifted to the University of Glasgow from the Glasgow Philanthropist, William Ewing. So if anybody ever tells you that the Scots are tight with money, tell me watch this video. And here it tells you new buildings were erected in North Street. A foundation stone was laid by Andrew Carnegie in September 1907. Completed building was opened by Lord Rosebery on the 16th of October 1911. Right, so they built that in 4 years. Are you buying that? And this here is the Mitchell Library, and as you can see, it is a massive structure, and I would defy you to try and build something like this today in 4 years, never mind when they say it was built. So let's go down and have a closer look. Right, so, and here we have the Mitchell Library. Would you like a closer look? Okay. So, let's do a walkabout and have a look at the Mitchell Library. And it also tells you here that James Sellers in 1877, William B. Whittle, 1911. The dates are all mental. And here is the goddess Minerva, who was the goddess of wisdom, apparently. And she must be, because she's holding a scroll. That's the clue. So I'm going to show you where they've taken a picture that we'll have a look at later. And the picture itself is a lie. So we go through the front door and we go to the southeastern corner, I beg your pardon, and this is where I think the photograph in question was taken from, somewhere in this part of the front of the building. And I think the picture itself, the camera was on some kind of tripod, or I'm guessing a platform would have been built. And we'll take a look down this side of the building, and you can see quite clearly that there are windows at street level. and at the bottom half, this is where they've renovated or changed the appearance of the building, and they tell you that it was an addition. No, there was no additions. What they've did is changed the fascia of the building. That's all. Right, and we'll go back to the corner and I'll show you what's at the front of the building. And here we have windows below the street and more windows below the street. And in here there's a grill, and down below the grill you can clearly see another floor. Right, so that happened. And the same thing applies on the other. Oh, look at this, it's falling apart. So, is this the sandstone rotting away, or is it a skim of plaster that needs repaired, like we see in many of these old world buildings? Right, and the day I went here I could not get any access because everywhere was still closed. And I'll be looking into more of these faces that seem to be all over the place, and I'll be looking to see if there's a connection with the buildings that they're associated with. And again, just like the other side of the building, there's a grill with a floor below the street. I wonder when the last time that was cleaned, because even below, even with the grill, it's still full of rubbish. And I think this is, a lot of it's plaster work. A lot of it's not sandstone. And now have a look down the side of the building. Now, you can see right away that it is below the street, and so are lots and lots of rooms. And I also could not gain access to the basement car park, which is really deep. So just like loads of buildings in New York, say, where they've got underground car parks, and this is why, because they have got a large basement area below the building. And unfortunately the back of the building is covered with scaffolding because they're obviously renovating it or something. And when I seen these windows here, I knew I'd seen them somewhere before, you know, the same style. So I found out where I'd seen them before, and it was not in Glasgow, it was in fact in Moscow, thanks to Philip Drusnin. Cheers, mate. But I did find a way to show you there are basement levels, more than one, because yesterday Ellen and I took a run into the city for one reason: to take this picture. This is the elevator in the Mitchell Library. Basement 2, then basement 3. And this is the interior back in the day. And as you can see, it's just a big empty building. Right now they've got all different levels and stuff, but that's just added floors. And speaking of floors, here's the Freemasonic floor that's all over the building. And this is the picture I mentioned earlier with Andrew Carnegie supposedly laying the foundation stone of a building that's already there. And there's a lot about this image. Now, for example, it is supposed to be the laying of a foundation stone, and it should be in a large area where there are no structures. And they've done it in secret because they've, as you can see, they've erected this fence and covered it with some black material so that nobody can see this public ceremony. Because there's the public in there, and I'm guessing they're wondering what the fuck's going on, because the building, as I say, is right here. And here we've got, that's the judges of the city. In fact, I think there's like over 200 people here, and this to me would probably be the elite of the city. So here's Carnegie, and when is the last time you ever saw anybody ringing a bell while they're laying a foundation stone? Now, I don't know who this dude is, but he's higher up judicial level than these guys sitting here. You can tell by the width of this ermine on his coat. And I don't know why this guy's dressed in black. Maybe he's the guy that sentences you to death. All he needs now is a black cap. But this to me looks more like an altar. This is definitely a ceremony, but it is not a foundation ceremony. This is something else. So you can tell me in the comments what you think it is. It's not a Freemasonic ceremony because there's not an apron in sight. But this is the elite of the city, and this is a ceremony of some kind, and it's not about the foundation of a building. Well, thanks for watching. Please comment.